anticipation of what happens next after that. But I want to give this before I do that. So as we make our way back in here, I don't know that I'll get a chance to say this yesterday, but there's a lot. I don't know that I'll get a chance to say this tomorrow, but there's this bit of history about a fellowship that might be at least encouraging to all of you as far as focus of missions at fellowship. So when the church got started, it was actually about a month before the church began that we started considering offerings and even buying offering plates and how we were going to handle that. We hadn't considered that yet. What we were going to do with an offering, we hadn't considered that either. But yet we knew as a part of our worship that we were going to be giving. And it was an opportunity for us as a church to establish just philosophy and principle behind our giving. And so what we did for our very first service is we established that missions was going to be a part of our very beginning. And the reason that's significant is many churches are encouraged not to take on missions giving, especially as a church plant, until you get established yourself. But it was important for us to establish missions and our support of the local and global effort from our very first service. So I'm just saying from our very first service, we had missions offerings, and it's always been a part of our church and a part of our endeavor to reach out. And I will say this about missions. When you're thinking about missions, it's a healthy conversation because everybody has a context, and very often the context of missions is doing ministry away. And it's important for us to know that it's not either or, but both and. Our mission is right here. And it's a personal engagement to missions that we're asking our people to have, especially when it comes to giving. But the burden that we have is that we be engaged in that process personally. So therefore, we don't, from our missions account, presently take anything from our general account. General giving supports this local mission. Every dollar that is supporting our missionaries presently is done by individual families and individuals saying, I want to be supportive of missions, and I'm going to designate to give to that. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way that we'll always do it, but however we do it, the goal is to put us personally engaged in the process, personally involved in the whole aspect of giving. And so I know that the giving in the past has been what we have used as well to, when there was a surplus, not to sit on that as a nest egg, but to get it out to do the work that it's intended to do. And by God's grace, we've been able to do that and participate with other ministries. And I want to say this last thing about missions before we hear from Daniel, and that is missions as a context is healthy for a church in the broad scope because a church needs to be focused on its local mission, its work here as a ministry, but a church to be healthy also needs to be looking outside of its walls. And that's something that's very important to us. And our missions, not only giving, but our missionaries and our context of trying to partner with other churches is all missional. It's getting the work of the ministry done. So we're thankful very much for the laborers that God has given us to partner with. And finding people who are on the same page, going the same direction is not something that you should take for granted. All the missionaries that we have are people that we really believe in and respect and have a high regard for their doctrinal and personal position in their walk with God.
Well, he seems fairly nice. I enjoyed hearing that, and it's exciting to think about the baptism. Anyway, that's neat. That's encouraging to my heart. I've enjoyed watching just from a distance, because I don't actually not gotten to visit their ministry there, but watching from a distance what God's doing, some the challenges, the ups, the downs, and then the blessings. And anyway, I've watched my brother endure through some things, and then see God bless. It's just encouraging to my heart to watch. Here's what I want to do for the time right now. I'm going to put this up as a framework that's going to be our core, kind of the core for our discussion. Let me explain the framework, and then I've got homework for you. Well, it's not homework, we'll do it here. I've got a challenge for you. So, the question, or the idea goes, we can talk about the whole structure of Scripture, like Genesis to Revelation kind of structure. I actually put this up earlier. This is another way of expressing it. Kind of, this is the notion of all of the Old Testament pointing to the center, Christ, and then because of Christ expanding out. Sorry, I'm going to do this. I don't have this very well diagrammed. I'll show you something later. But the notion of everything points down like arrows to Jesus coming. That's the center of the story of the entire Bible. And then because Jesus came, died, and rose again, it points like arrows back out. So the whole Bible, as you proceed from Genesis to Revelation, is like an hourglass. He's coming, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming. He came! Okay, because he came, let's go tell the story. Everybody needs to know. So it's like an hourglass. And if you do it that way, the story of Acts and the epistles is the story of that spread. Acts and the epistles are how we go out and spread the good news of Jesus coming. Okay, that's one way of talking about the story of the entire Bible. This is another, I find, helpful way to talk about the story of the entire Bible. Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. And in this framework, our idea goes, God made the world, and it is good. Sin corrupted the world. Now things are messy and really mixed up. Jesus enters the world, and he begins to make things right again. Until, when Jesus returns, things will finally be good. At long last, everything will be as it ought to be. Okay, so here's your part of the homework assignment. Can you do this with me, or will you do this with me? And anyway, we'll do this together. The idea goes, I'd like us to try to figure out how to talk about missions through that framework. I'd like us to try to figure out how we would take the concept of missions and just roll it through those 4 stages. My concern being, if we're not careful, that we start thinking of missions as basically, okay, that started in the New Testament. Like that started with the Great Commission, that started with the book of Acts. And I don't think that's true. I think missions is so central to the heart of Christianity that we ought to be able to talk about missions from Genesis all the way to the end. Okay, let me give you an example or two. So I'm just going to pick something. Actually, you could throw a topic at me, but how about I'll go for family? And I'm just going to run family through those four stages. Okay, and I'm giving you this as an example so you can kind of see how the thought goes. And then I want to see if I can work together with you. We'll kind of do this collaboratively. And can we do missions through the 4 stages? But let's try family. Okay, if I was doing family through this, I'm starting out with the creation. A pretty foundational notion is, in the beginning, God created the family and it was good. Who did the first marriage? God did the first marriage. God designed marriage. He literally made the man and he made the woman, and he made them for each other, for a task, to fulfill his command, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion. Right? And so he knew what he was doing, and God made the first marriage. That's stage 1. And what that tells you is family and marriage are not just like cultural institutions that we came up with. They're not inventions. They come from God, and along with that, they are good. They are good, right? Why? Because God made the world and it was good. There was no sin, right? Even the notion of man and woman different, that is not a result of sin. It's creational. God made it this way. Okay, but then if I move to the second stage, as soon as sin enters into the world, you already see the corruption of that. So watch the fall and read it closely, and we've got some kind of co-opting or switching around of things where God gave the command to Adam, but now Eve is engaging with the serpent, and Eve takes the fruit and she eats, and then she gives it to her husband. Something's upside down and weird. Like, what is happening here? And now then the curse falls on when it falls upon the woman, it falls on her in respect to childbirth and in respect to struggling with the marriage. And the man also is going to struggle in his work and in his relationship to the family. The curse has just broken something about the family. The family's going to struggle now. And you turn to the next chapter and you have Lamech talking to his, wives? Like, where did we get that? Where did that come from? And we have Cain killing his brother. In other words, I'm only in chapter 4, Genesis 4, and the family is shattered. And from that, I just roll forward in the story, and even some of the good, better people are messed up. Abraham's got wives, and then he can't have a child, so he goes and impregnates his servant, and ooh. It's just falling apart. Okay, sin has corrupted the family. Jesus enters the story. And he enters the story, ready for this? This is astonishing, in the framework of a family. Jesus is born. He's born to an actual mother. He's born to an adoptive father. And as you read forward, Jesus he's flourishing in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. He is functioning, Luke 2, in the structure of a family. He submits himself to his parents. The one who made heaven and earth, and the one who instituted the family, and the one who gives life and breath to every human being, the creator of all, submitted himself to a mother, submitted himself to a father. It says that, Luke 2. He submitted himself to them. Even though they were sinners, even though he was going to save them from their sin, he submitted himself to them. So Jesus shows us the ultimate picture of what it looks like to function humbly within a family. Within, I think it's fair to say, a dysfunctional family, in the sense that he's the maker of heaven and earth, he's perfect, he has no sin, but he can submit himself to sinners. I think you can too. He's perfect, and he still did. Okay, none of us gets to go like, I'm better than my parents, therefore I don't submit. Jesus was better, perfect. He was the creator. The result then of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection is that he creates a new family. We are the family of God, we are the people of God. And so when we use language like Brother Bob, Sister Mary, that's not just like a cutesy thing we do. That's rising from the fabric of the New Testament. We are now brothers and sisters. And what that means then is we care for one another as brothers and sisters. God is our Father, and we are all siblings. We work together and love one another. And someday in eternity then, we will be in the presence of God, an immense family, worshiping him forever. People from every tribe, tongue, and nation. One family in the presence of God, finally restored. Okay, so I can take a topic like family and I can just walk it through with multiple scriptures, multiple ideas, multiple passages, and I can end up, I think, with a fairly rich framework for how I think about the topic. Your turn. Let's do this with missions. Can I take this framework? I'm going to have to take it off the screen because I need to write some things. So if you want to write it down quick, or I'll also remind you as you go. It's okay. But can we do this with missions? Can you help me just start gathering some categories? I'm going to start off with with creation. How do I think about creation in light of missions? Like, are these, I don't know, do these work? Do these connect? Do we have ideas there? Let's just kind of see what concepts we can gather and see where this will go. So who wants to start us off? Any ideas that hit you there? What would you say about missions in respect to the creation of the world and the way that God made it in the beginning? Thoughts there? Anyone want to get us started? Oh, well, that's neat. You have them both at the same time. I'll just take this one off. No worries. Great. Okay. What do you think? Anyone want to give me something here? Woohoo. Great. Creation Start off with creation. God made man with purpose. So I'm going to say purpose and work. Great. How about could I do this if I'm just going to try to connect it a little bit? God made man with a purpose for work, and I would say an additional one for fellowship with him. A way of saying this would be, in the garden, mankind has perfect fellowship with God. There is, at that point, no separation. There is no angst. There is no judgment. That man has not turned, excuse me. Okay, I almost had a sneeze. I don't remember too many times sneezing while talking through something. That's a terrible thing to watch. Okay. But no, there is at that point no alienation. Man has not yet alienated himself from God. Great point. Yes, sir? That's not him. We'll see. I'm okay if you want to turn the lights off. Yeah. Just dim it if you would. Yeah, great. Thank you for saying that. Great. Okay. So I've got something there. God made man. That's a great start. God made man for a purpose. Brilliant. Thank you. Anything else that hits you here? I mean, something else that you would put in here in the creation side of things as a starting point? Yes, ma'am. Great. That's good. Great. These are great. When God says to Adam and Eve, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. I mean, if we just expound that for a second, I think the idea of this goes that God expects that the world will not just stay two. He expects that we'll end up with a world with lots of people in it. And so we're going to end up with a full world. That would imply then, an entire globe in relationship to God. The notion or the fact that the world has now in it 8 billion plus humans is not a surprise, and it's not actually. This is kind of a turning point in how you think of things. The fact that there are 8 billion people on the planet does not represent a tragedy. Like, we got to get involved in the environmentalism thing and try to trim down the human population. We've overpopulated the planet, and let's get rid of the humans so that the other species can flourish. The fact that the planet has 8 billion of us is an expression that what God intended for humanity actually did turn out. There's a lot of us, and that's a good thing. But it should be, if I'm combining these two, a lot of us in relationship with God. These are great points. Okay, that actually nails or gets anything I wanted to say. Anybody else wanted to add a thought? You guys are right on. Yes? Excellent. God reveals himself. I'm thinking of, excellent, great point here. I'm thinking of in Genesis, the Lord God walked in the cool of the garden. There's this fellowship idea. Our God is a God who delights to relate to humans and to be in fellowship with humans. He delights to know us and to be known. That's very missional, isn't it? I mean, it's going to head somewhere. God is at work.
He's working through.
Cool. Great. Excellent. Great. Next time I share this somewhere, I can do a better job because of the things you guys are giving me. That's great. God works through the man. You know, you could do a thing in missions. You could think something like, wouldn't it be better if God just sent revelation on clouds somewhere? And we don't have to worry about sending people, like something just floats by and it has the gospel on it. But it's to your idea. He chooses to work in and through the people. So he's given us a task to do. Great. I would summarize out this point, or this bit of it, to say missions in a proper sense. In a proper sense, missions did not exist in the beginning because it wasn't needed. And, not to be snappy about it or funny about it, but when it was just Adam and Eve in the garden, exactly 100% of humanity was in good relationship with God. All of the race, they all knew him. And there was no alienation. There was no angst. There was no rebellion. There was no treachery. Because all was good. It was as it ought to be. The pre-missions state, the goodness of the creation without sin and without the curse and without brokenness. And yet, if you wanted to kind of round it out all the way or something, missions exists as the heart's yearning to say, to be back in fellowship with God, that is the good state. And so the reason that one of the things that impels us towards missions is to say, it's horrifying and tragic that in the past, all of humanity had relationship with God, and now a ton of humanity doesn't. And that stinks. That's tragic. And so missions looks at the situation. There was a day when we all knew him, and now we don't. We can't be satisfied with that. That's not just a it is what it is thing. Something must change. That would be connected to this notion of fellowship with God. We were made to have fellowship. We were made to have relationship with God. It's like humanity trying to do something like, hey, I have an idea. Okay, what's your idea? I'm going to be way more productive than anybody else. Oh, that's so cool. How are you going to do it? I'm going to just skip out on sleep. I think sleep is a silly idea. I'm not sure who decided to invent it as a cultural institution. And so I've decided, let's just repudiate it. Let's just dump sleep, and I'll just work all the time. That's ignoring a huge reality about your nature. You're not going to be able to just be I decided by sheer fiat will power, I don't sleep anymore. It doesn't work like that, okay? It ignores something about the human condition. How about this? You cannot ignore something very fundamental about the human condition. You are made to have relationship with God, and things will not work correctly apart from it. Living life apart from relationship with God is basically like, I'll live life without sleep. Something's going to break down. Okay? And so if I look at creation, I discover something about the human nature or the human condition. We were made to have relationship with God, and therefore when I look around me and I see people that don't, these people that's dysfunction. These people cannot function properly. Something broken about the human condition apart from him. Excellent. Okay, well then the rest of our time should be easy because that went great. Let's talk about the fall. How would I think about the fall in respect to relationship with God, and specifically, how would I think about the fall in respect to missions? Give me some thoughts or initial ideas that hit your mind. The fall and missions. How does this work? Anyone want to start us out? Yes, please. Great. Great. I'll do something like an immense need. So anyway, we can just do immensity of the need. Great. Good. Yeah, that's interesting. We could build out the idea of immensity of the need. We could just say ubiquity. Sorry, just universal. The need is universal. I talked earlier about the notion, this kind of concept of arbitrage. You have places where the gospel is plentiful, and you have places where the gospel is thin. This is also, I think, a healthy Christian attitude. I've never been in a place where somebody sat there and they were like, yeah, we have too much gospel here. That's true. So we never actually, it's interesting, but it doesn't matter where you go, you never actually have a place where people feel like they have too much. I think that's, for believers, I think that's good. I think that's a good instinct. And another way of saying that is, if the need is ubiquitous, if it's universal, if it's everywhere, there is exactly nowhere you go where you don't feel the sting. There's exactly nowhere where you go where you don't feel like, we need more good, healthy churches. We need a better gospel witness. Everywhere you go feels that. And that's really healthy. Good. Another thought. We're trying to attach the fall of man or the fall into sin, but that extends kind of all the way into the present. How does sin now set up for missions? Yes, sir. Excellent, excellent. Broken relationship. My pastor back in Edmonton, when he was young, his parents split up. And so as just over the years, or just as I've talked to him or gotten to know him, or as things will happen, that comes up. It's kind of like this, it's a very disruptive, powerfully disruptive moment in his life that then it has to come up as you think about different things because it was so destructive. Here was this moment of broken relationship, and the cracks echo from there all the way into the present. Okay, you have to think of the story of the universe. The story of the universe that way. Like it was not made to be this way, and then one day things shattered, and so the human condition into the present is a function of that shattering. Great. So sin is. Anyway, that's a big deal. Sin is not just the day that we humans started dying, but sin is the day that we turned our backs on God. It was treachery. It was a moment of treachery. We were in relationship with him, and one day when he turned his back, we stabbed him in the back. Sin was the day when we turned in treachery. Yes, Laura. Ooh. Great. Tower of Babel. Right on. Why do you bring up the Tower of Babel? So smart. So smart. Excellent. Yeah. I thought of two events. One of them is the flood, and the other is the Tower of Babel, that are kind of like I said at the beginning, like by definition, at the creation, all of humanity was in relationship with God, like both of them. All of humanity was in relationship with God. Well, in the same way, the flood and the Tower of Babel are these moments, and there haven't been moments since, really, when the entire planet all comes together as one, and they act as one. So the entire planet is affected by the flood. And of course, it's a huge bottleneck, or whatever you call it. Anyway, where you get to the other side of it, and all of humanity is now represented in only 8 persons. In the Tower of Babel, the entire planet comes together as one. And because of the fall, that does not turn out well. I'll come to this later, but we will someday all have redeemed humanity, but we will someday all flourish as one. But when all of humanity came together as one, what did they do? Give them a chance. Get them all together and say, what would you guys like to do? What do you want to do? What would be human flourishing? We all want to eat marshmallows? Do we all want to play games? We all want to make jokes? What do we want to do? And their answer is, rebel against God. Okay, now we know what your heart is. That's what they do, given the opportunity. So, excellent, Tower of Babel. And then, great point. If I go past that, then I realize that the implications of their sin is we end up with the shattering of humanity for their own good. Because now, for their good, out of mercy, God spreads them out into different groups so they won't get themselves into so much trouble. And the language thing that we deal with, somebody said yesterday, learning language, that's one of the challenges to missions. Absolutely. The language learning thing we deal with, if God ever puts you in that position and you're just slaving away for months trying to learn a language, what you've got to think is, this is so hard because God erected challenging barriers so that humanity would keep themselves out of trouble. And so he put the barrier fairly high. Not impossible, but fairly high, so that in general we would just stay in our lane and not work together and do another Tower of Babel thing. And so the struggle I'm feeling right now, and this feels pretty hard, that was an expression of God's judgment or mercy at the Tower of Babel. also, I am slightly Pentecostal in this sense. When I was working on trying to learn Tagalog, I prayed that God would give me the gift of tongues. And I just meant by that, I really did pray this prayer. I didn't expect any kind of, but I would have accepted. I didn't expect like a miraculous provision that someday I would immediately speak in Tagalog, though if he had given that, I'd been fine. But what I did pray was, Lord, you erected this barrier, but for the sake of the gospel, you at times have pulled back this barrier, like at Pentecost, so that the gospel would spread. And will you help me right now through this book that's in front of me and these flashcards that I'm working on right now and the practice partner that I'm going to have later today, would you help me to try to get through this barrier for the sake of the spread of your gospel? See, I think that's all connected to this Tower of Babel thing. So there, now you know. You have a Pentecostal speaking to you, sorry. Okay, great one. Someone else? Anyone else? Yes, sir, please. What was the last one again? Sorry, the opportunity for eternal life? Great. Human uniqueness, promise of redemption. Great. So, if I look down at, I think what you just did there, good luck reading what I'm writing. I don't even know what I'm doing there. But what I look down those four, I basically see that I feel like you summarize out the biblical story and the gospel in a subset, and that gospel or whole story of Scripture subset is attached to the uniqueness of humanity. And this human condition, we were made in God's image. That was really well said. We can obey God, which both implies the possibility, but also the fact that in reality we don't. And so it's the condition of sin that I think is underneath this as well, combined with the result of that sin, eternal punishment. But the story and the promise of hope, it doesn't end there. Excellent. Super good. Yes, sir. We seek solutions outside of God. Excellent. Great. Yeah, before God made a world, he put us in it, he gave us instructions for it, and then immediately, right away, we're going out and trying to we're trying to cut him out of the process. What on earth? He made the world. Any chance you think he knows how to run it better? Yeah. Great. I'm going to start hitting up against time here, but if the notion of the initial creation was that all of humanity is in relationship with God because there is no sin, all of humanity there was no need for missions because all of humanity was already in relationship. As I move across to the fall, and I just see this progression right here, I also discover that sin affects not just some of humanity, but all of it. So it's a universal, it's another universal. That's another reason, if I'm just kind of fast-forwarding the tape a little bit, why is missions universal? Because all of humanity was made to have a relationship with God, all of humanity fell into sin, and therefore all of humanity is alienated from God. Guess how much of humanity is receiving a free offer of the gospel? All of humanity. It's universal, right? So since we all fell, God comes and he approaches us all. Another idea, if you see the hope of Genesis 3:15, this is that promise that the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. It's just pointing ahead. Okay, missions exists because of that promise. This is so horrifying. Adam and Eve, all of humanity now stands alienated from God. And at that moment, there's a gospel presentation. You guys are cut off from God, terribly horrifying. Here is a statement of hope. God promises, I will send a redeemer. So the first gospel presentation, the first missionary effort, none other than God himself. God approached humanity. And on point of fact, he approached all of humanity at that moment. If you watch the Garden of Eden story, Adam and Eve have said they know that they're alienated from God, so they run away from God. They're covering themselves up with the fig leaves. They're hiding. God approaches them, and he seeks them, and he asks questions. And it is probing, and it is a confrontation, and then he presents the gospel, okay? So also now. How does missions work? Humanity is alienated from God, so we run from him. We hide from him behind things like materialism and false religions. We claim things like, oh, well, this isn't my culture. We hide. We put on fig leaves. We run from our God. And one of the expressions or the beauty of missions is, and God's not just going to let that stand. You don't get to hide behind your fig leaves forever. God will approach you, and he will confront you in the gospel. He will ask questions. Missions. That's what missions is. Missions is, through his people, God approaching alienated human beings and saying, what are you doing? Why are you hiding from me? Followed by a gospel presentation. And that's the fallen condition. It's God seeking man, not man seeking God. Man never seeks God. God seeks him. It's God, missions is God seeking out what has been lost. Missions is God choosing to reach out to people who are otherwise set on a pathway of death. Missions is God giving hope in the middle of dark despair. After someone has just fallen into sin, mission seeks them out. And God acted as the first missionary when he approached Adam and Eve. God restores relationship with humanity. All right, I could go from just fall into the whole pattern that follows after that. I think for sake of time, I'm gonna do this next section a little bit more. But how about a pattern now, and it's an extended pattern. I'll just call it the pattern that the hope grows. Okay, maybe one way we can do it is, let's see if I can pull this up. But if I had this diagram up here, and I'm thinking of the growth or the story of Scripture all the way through, yes, here we are. The story of Scripture is that God has prophesied or promised that he will send the Messiah to save humanity. And all the arrows point ahead to that story. God is going to send an answer. But that would look like different things. For instance, one thing that's beautiful in this pattern is the pattern that God talks to Abraham, and he says to Abraham, in your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Understand that seed properly according to Galatians. That seed is whom? Jesus, right? But hear the language, in your seed, I'm going to stick it in for the pronoun. In Jesus, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. What that tells you is always God has been concerned with the flourishing and the salvation of the planet. If you follow this up in the promises to David, God promises to David that he will have a descendant, and that descendant will be a blessing to the world. And it sounds like this in places like Isaiah chapter 2, that the house of the Lord will be lifted up, and all the nations will flow to it, and they will come and say, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. They will want to go that he may teach us his paths, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. All the nations finding hope. Isaiah 45:22, turn to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth. I am God, there is no other. By my mouth I have sworn, to me every knee will bow, every tongue shall swear allegiance. You hear that language in Philippians 2, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. In the original context of Isaiah 45, it's also the idea, all nations, all peoples. Isaiah 49:6, it is too light a thing that you would raise up the tribes of Jacob. I will make you a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. So we're starting to hear the sound of hope. Psalm 67 gets us into this direction. When I read in Psalm 67, the language of nations. Okay, and I get a bunch of different times with this that are just beautiful. Here, I'm going to read down through the psalm. May God make his face to shine upon us, that your way may be known among all the nations, your saving power among all nations. Let the peoples praise you. Let all the peoples praise you. Okay, so here's an idea that I'd like to put in this. Man has fallen, man has sinned, man has fallen away, but God's desire for salvation has always been the salvation of the earth. That's an important idea because of this. One of the things that we sometimes work through is missions in the Old Testament. So my idea here I want to push on a little bit is we're tempted to think, okay, in the Old Testament, God was concerned about Israel. In the New Testament, he's concerned about the Gentiles. And so kind of the notion that before Jesus came, it was a very Jewish-centric God. After Jesus comes, it becomes an international concerned God. And I call wrong. Because in fact, what you get is an idea that God has always been concerned about the salvation of the planet. Always. There's a difference. And you can see it in these arrows. In the Old Testament, it's a little bit more of the idea of, we might call it like a magnetic attraction. Israel will be blessed, Israel will be exalted, so that other people would go, whoa, what's going on over there? And be attracted to the gospel. New Testament, instead, the notion is spread out. Go and tell. Get out there. So that this message is spread. And sometimes people wonder, and I can't really build this idea out too much, but sometimes people wonder why there would be that difference. I think there's actually a really beautiful idea behind it. I think the idea goes that the story of the Old Testament itself is a series of narrowing promises pointing, of course, to the Messiah. So I think of it like this. It's like if in Genesis 3, when God said, seed of the woman, that could technically be any descendant after Adam and Eve. It could literally be any human besides Adam and Eve. Anyone. You kind of have no idea. Is this 1,000 generations away? Who it is, what it is. But it narrows, and God tells more information. You find out in Genesis 12, okay, it's going to be the descendant of a certain human, descendant of Abraham. Okay, that narrows the case down. From there, I want to know more detail. I mean, if you're kind of thinking, where is he? Where is he? Kind of like treasure hunt or something. Where is he? Where is he? I'm looking. I see all the faces. Are you he? No, I guess. Okay. What about you? Are you the one? No? Okay. We're trying to find out who it is. And so he's giving you clues. And one of the clues is he's going to be in the tribe of Judah. Okay, a little further. He's going to be a descendant of David. Okay, that's helpful. We're narrowing it down. Okay, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Okay, we're narrowing it down. Really onto something now. If you read Daniel, you even find out the chronology, he'll come at this time. Okay, and so I kind of view those as red flags all over. Here, pointers, there. And of course, the beauty of the Old Testament is he came. That changed everything. When I get to the New Testament, I have this pattern, okay, spread out everybody. Don't just huddle in one place. Be witnesses to me in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, unto the uttermost parts of the earth. The New Testament has this go out kind of idea. And if I put those two pieces together, I think it just highlighted something. The Old Testament narrows. He's there, right there. Look there, over there, narrows. The New Testament spreads. Get out of here, go tell the story. And what do you think maybe that would tend to highlight about the structure of the Bible itself? That even the difference in the story of Scripture and how we read about missions is built in a way to point you to the centrality of the cross. The reason that missions in the Old Testament was more magnetic, and the reason that missions in the New Testament is more explosive, is that the coming of Jesus changed everything. And it's more magnetic in the Old Testament because if you want to go find the Messiah, you know where he's going to be born. You know where he's going to die. He's going to rise again in Jerusalem. But now that the Messiah has come, get out of here. Look no more at Jerusalem. Run. Run for the hills and tell everybody you can. He came. It's finished. He's coming back, but for now, you go tell the nations. I think even the structure of the Bible itself is highlighted in some of this. That then does take me to this redemption idea, and we've already done that pretty solidly. I would just say, if you go back to the concepts I talked about earlier here, some of these concepts with the Great Commission, remember the Great Commission and the missions notion is intensely connected to the life and ministry of Christ. Okay, and so because Jesus came and died and rose again, intensely so, That's why we go and spread the good news. You can actually go past this from Jesus to his disciples. You get this concept that he says, as you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. I mean, the idea that Jesus was sent to the world. There was kind of a commission to Jesus. Okay, that's why we have a universal commission. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Why? Because he was the light of the world. And so because Jesus sheds light to the world, so also we must. Any other concepts you want to give us here? And I've got some of these concepts I've already unpacked a little bit. Because I've learned a lot of things from you guys. What would you add in here in respect to redemption? Talking about redemption in terms of missions or missions in this redemption framework. Anybody want to add something further before we just move on from that? Yeah, I would affirm that the original purpose, subdue the earth and have dominion, stands alongside of it, right? But you said the word changed, and I agree with that. It's kind of, we've added an additional component to it. It's this, okay, now that mankind is alienated, how about this? Mankind today tries to subdue the earth and have dominion in all kinds of nasty ways. And so we're saying, hey, I mean, humanity still is here and we still have a mission, but now we've added another, you said change, added another idea to it. We've got to call alienated and rebellious humanity back to follow God. Great. How about, okay, I'll take your idea, and how about let's structure it like this. You remember I said, like back here with the fall, God is the first missionary because God reaches out. I think that fits here as the notion, in the coming of Christ, we see something intensely missional. And so I did mention this last night. This was the concept, Jesus, the climactic missionary. I don't know, how much are we accustomed to thinking of Jesus as a missionary? We ought to be. You have that Luke 4 passage of Jesus says, I'll be a light to the nations, to Galilee of the Gentiles. You find Jesus, and I could support this with like a long list and string of passages. You find that a recurring pattern with Jesus is he's going to the margins and he's reaching Gentiles. He ministers to Jews for sure, but the John 1 concept, he came to his own people and they rejected him. They received him not. And Jesus then ministers and in some ways finds the greater acceptance already from a lot of Gentiles, or unexpected people anyway. I mean, you've got people like the Roman centurion that expresses faith at the end of the crucifixion. You just have it kind of all over once you start looking at it. You know, the Samaritan woman, you've got a lot of this going on. You've got a centurion that comes to him and the concern is for his servant that's dying. You've got a lot of Gentiles that come. So Jesus, the climactic missionary, I think that's a huge deal. Okay, anyone else? Someone else? I do think absolutely we've got to fit in here an idea that when Jesus dies, he is the life laid down for the life of the world. He carries the sins of the world. Okay, and so that world concept just has to fit in there. You have that strongly in John 1. You have that strongly, right at the beginning of John 1, behold the Lamb of God, which takes away the sins of the. See, and so it would be one thing, let's say, to be like Muhammad, and your goal is to try to bring pride and vigor to your people. And so like a new religious teacher who comes and he tries to create a new religious movement for the Arabs. It's pretty ambitious to step forward and say, I offer hope for all of planet Earth. I mean, at that point in time, they don't even have the technical means to travel to everywhere on planet Earth. Though they probably were doing a little bit. They don't even have the means to go everywhere, and Jesus is still going to stand there and say, I am the light of the. That's intense, right? I mean, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten. This is intense. So the ambition, No, it's not ambition, it's just love. Of a person who steps up and says, I offer hope for everywhere. Pretty intense. Okay, that takes us to the last, and let's finish out with this, of course. Consummation, or I'll say eternity. How would we think about this? I mean, how do we think about missions in the end, or how do we think about missions in light of the conclusion of all things? Thoughts there? What ideas should I put in here? Missions in light of eternity. I can get that. I can seed the thought initially. Do you remember we said in the beginning with Genesis, missions did not exist because exactly 100% of humanity was already in good relationship with God. Okay, if I think of missions in terms of eternity, what I have is universal restoration. We understand, obviously, and I'm assuming this idea, of course, there are people who by their choice, will die in unrepented rebellion against God. These people, and this is a horrifying tragedy, are not restored. I don't mean by this a universalism as in everybody gets there in the end. I do mean that when Jesus reigns over planet Earth, all of humanity on planet Earth will know him and worship him and love him. And so as it was in the beginning, so it will be in the end, but so much greater. In the end, all of humanity, redeemed humanity, worships Jesus. Every citizen of planet Earth acknowledges him as their king. And so if there's no need for missions in the beginning, there is no need for missions in the end. I think that's actually a really joyful thing. I love the concept of missions. It's a joyful thing to affirm that missions is a temporary necessity. Because missions has underneath it the sad fact of alienation. And so the end of the story is, and yes, I mean, prophecy will cease. And so will missions. Tongues will cease and prophecy will cease, and so will missions. Because there will be a day when there will be exactly nowhere that you have to go on planet Earth and inform them about the story of Jesus. They will all know it and love it, and they will all walk in his light. There will be no more missions conferences except we get together and just recount together the wonderful works of God that he did in the past. That's the closest we come to missions conferences. Yes, sir. Good. I love it because that's so good. I would put in here the idea something like, when I stand in eternity and I look around, Revelation 5 says that you'll see people from every tribe, tongue, language, and nation, and they will worship before the throne, and they will sing praises to him. And I said last night, I'm going to look out there, and I'm going to see my Filipino brothers and sisters, and kind of want to go hang out over there for a little while. There's going to be people from every nation around there, and that is the fruit and the testimony to the fact that some people got it, and they did it. Some people heard the Great Commission, they got the beauty of it, their hearts burned within them when they heard about it, and they said, I'll go, pick me, pick me, pick me. And they went and they spread the good news, and I'll look around the throne someday and I'll see proof. I'll see visible proof. Faces from all over the place. And I'm just picking on myself because I'm an Anglo. They won't just be Anglo faces. I'll see beautiful faces from all over the planet. People that love my Jesus. And we'll share together in that. And it's a proof, like you said. It's a proof that somebody went out and did it. Awesome. Excellent. Great. Anyone else? Any other thing we want to put in here? Oh, rest. Hey, that's it. I'll put the end of missions. And that's really not like, finally, good, we don't have to do it anymore. But it is we will rest because what do you say? Oh, maybe this would be better. The success of missions. This phrase got some funny press because of how it went down the one time, but mission accomplished. And this time, it's really mission accomplished. It's actually done. It's finished. It's great. Good. Anyone else? I'll try this. This might be a wee bit provocative. We'll give it a shot. What do you guys think about a one-world government? Oh man, you guys already see where I'm going. I can't pull one on you. Yes, sir. Yeah. Totally depends on the ruler. You know, that kind of like urge in there that's, you know, it's in the minds like societally or something. And we all know eschatologically, meaning in the end times, it's going to become a reality. That kind of desire for a one world government, it is exactly sort of a true idea turned upside down, flipped on its head, and turned nasty and sour. Humanity sort of gets this in a way. We are one people. We are one species. We are one type of being. We are the only being made in the image of God. And we ought to be one. And so they'll give a shot at it. And it's like, you know, so close. You're on the right track. The whole world unified together as one, under a single head. Satan. No, wait, that's not what was supposed to go in that slot. See, it's a caricature of the true. And so the notion of a one world government is exactly so horrifying. Because there is nobody I would want in that slot who is incorruptible enough, who is good enough, who could withstand the temptations to be the ruler of the entire planet. There is nobody who can be in that spot and remain incorruptible, except for one. And if Jesus is the king of a one-world government, I love it. And so actually the end of the story and eternity is, if you think of missions, the international idea, the notion, you know, kind of the feel you do have. You look at the flags, you look at the cultures, you look at the people, and something in your heart goes, oh, there's so much beauty in all of these nations and these peoples and all of their ways. And you see all of that. There's something in that is legitimate. What you're longing for is the day when every tribe, tongue, people, and nation would praise the one Jesus as their king. That's what you're hoping for. That's what you're longing for. And the glory of missions, or the beauty of missions in this discussion, is we affirm, and that's actually going to happen. It'll actually happen. Okay, last comment, and then we should close out. Yes, sir, please. Excellent, great, good. Glory of God, excellent, really good, because what is the thing that drives missions? Ultimately, God's glory. That's what we're endeavoring for. I love it. Thank you. That was excellent interaction. That was great interaction. Very helpful to me. I was able to thicken up ideas by hearing your ideas. Thank you. I appreciate that input. And again, we're taking us back to that whole framework: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. We'll take a break. When you come back, I'm going to try throwing something else at you that's really interactive. I'm going to read a scenario, and it's a thorny one. And I want to just practice a little bit and try some of the dynamics that happen when you work through mission scenarios. I think it's going to cause you to appreciate maybe the dilemma that some of your missionaries are in. And some of the challenges that they face. It'll also probably help as you think, or as you might encounter, how to interact with people around you. Because you can get thrown into these scenarios. Right in North America, I've been thrown into some of these scenarios. And it can be really helpful to struggle through it.